For 120 years, God warned that the world was going to be destroyed by a global flood. Many refused to believe that such a catastrophe could ever happen and said that it was impossible. Noah repeatedly said that it would happen, and to show his faith in God's message, he invested his time and fortune in building a gigantic boat as proof of his belief. Many must have wondered if it would really happen, but ignored the warnings. Finally, when the animals miraculously made their way into the ark, people must have realized that this was no human trick, and that this was indeed a sign of some monumental event about to happen. But in the end, only 8 people cared enough to take advantage of the means of salvation that God had provided for them. Noah and his family were the only humans who responded to the message of God in that day, and the rest of the world was swept away by the flood. Could it be that time is running out? Christ said that the world's last generation would be like those who lived in Noah's day. In the book of Matthew, Jesus spoke these very words. As the days of Noah were, so the coming of the Son of Man will be. But in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day Noah ordered the ark. They didn't know until the flood came and swept them all away. This is the way that the coming of the Son of Man will be. They were so busy with the cares and pleasures of life that they did not take time to prepare for the destruction that God said would take place on this earth. Could it be, as we live out our lives from day to day, consumed with all the things around us, that the very same thing could happen to you?
A few years ago, it was not uncommon for a man to say as he looked at the colour of the sky before dusk, "It looks as if we might be in for a storm." Men now use scientific instruments to foretell the weather by observing the signs in the atmosphere. Christ spoke of this very thing when he said, "When it is evening, you say, it will be fair weather today, for the sky is red and lowering. O ye hypocrites, you can discern the face of the sky, but you cannot discern the signs of the times." With the help of science, weather predicting has become quite exact. But with the increase of scientific gadgets and labor-saving devices, most people take less and less time to study the signs of the times that Christ said would foretell the end of this world. Occasionally, a misguided soul will arise to predict the exact date of the end of all things. A few people will be concerned, and some will anxiously watch the outcome of this false prophecy. When the time comes and nothing happens, those concerned will breathe a huge sigh of relief and settle back into their same routines and habits. Each crisis and unfulfilled prediction of destruction has the effect of hardening the sinner in his unbelief. Like the men who heard the boy cry, "Wolf, wolf," the world has learned to take even the super colossal as though it were a daily event. Is it any wonder that man has failed to notice the many signs that God has hung along the highway of life to remind us that we are nearing the end of man's rebellion against his maker? Christ has given us a number of signs to warn us of impending disaster, that we might not be swept away by the climactic events that will attend the end of this world.
And so when we think about that, our first question says, who only knows the exact day and hour of the end of this world and the coming of Christ? We find our text in Matthew chapter 24 and verse 36. And our text says, "But of that day and hour knoweth no man, no, not the angels of heaven, but my Father only." And so when we think about time running out, it's only after our time has run out that we think, I didn't have enough time. And here Jesus is talking about the fact that while he was on earth and he was talking to the disciples, nobody knew when time would run out except our Heavenly Father. Let's move on to our second question. Is there any way by which we can know when the end is near? We go back to the book of Matthew and we see in verse 32 and 33 of chapter 24 that it says, "Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise ye, that when ye shall see all of these things, know that it is near, even at the doors." So Jesus is telling us that when we see the fig tree and it blossomed and its branches sprouted leaves, you knew that summer was near. And we know how to tell the seasons as they're approaching. We can tell when a season is near. And Jesus was saying that the end of time is like that, that we can tell when it is near. Let's go on to question 3. What will the nations be doing just before the coming of Christ? Again, in Matthew 24 and verse 6 and 7, we find our answer. "And ye shall hear of wars and rumours of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass. But the end is not yet. For nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places." We've always had war. People will say, "Oh, well, that's nothing new. I've heard that all before." But when we think about nation against nation, this word actually is translated from the word ethnos, which is the root word of ethnicity. And I think we could all agree that when we think about the last 2 or 3 years, never before have we seen the scale of ethnic tension. As we look at this topic and as we look at how we are approaching the very end of time, we see this being fulfilled more than ever. We see ethnicity against ethnicity, around the world, not just black against white, but we see in various countries. We saw it in Europe. We've seen it in the Middle East. We've seen it all around the globe. And so now more than ever, this text comes to the forefront as we think about the signs that Jesus predicted would happen before the end of time. We also see at the end of this text, it talks about pestilences and earthquakes in diverse places. That simply means in different places, places that you wouldn't expect them to be. And now more than ever, the intensity of pestilences or famines, disease, earthquakes, we're seeing them all over the world, especially in places that we've never seen them before. Question 4, for what will the nations be preparing near the end of time? We're going to go to the Old Testament now and Joel chapter 3. And verses 9 to 12 says, "Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into saws and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say, I am strong. Assemble yourselves and come, all ye heathen, and gather yourselves together round about. Thither cause thy mighty ones to come down, O Lord. Let the heathen be wakened and come up to the valley of Jehoshaphat, for there will I sit to judge all the heathen round about." There's going to be a time of trouble, a time that we have not experienced before in this world. And as we read previously, war will be so prominent around the world, nation against nation, different ethnicities warring against one another in different countries. People will be going to war as though it is so natural that we will see that on an unprecedented scale. At the moment, with war and the atrocities of war, people are still shocked by what they see when we see it on the news, in the media. But there will be a time where it will just be commonplace. And we're pretty much at that place now for many people. When we hear about war, it's just another war in another part of the world. We're almost becoming numb to not only war, but the atrocities of it. And this will certainly continue down until the very end of time. Question 5, what terms are used to show the anxiety and the trouble that will exist among the nations just before the end? Our text comes from Luke chapter 21 and verses 25 to 26. And there shall be signs in the sun and in the moon and in the stars, and upon the earth distress of nations, with perplexity, the sea and the waves roaring, men's hearts failing them for fear, and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. You know, this text is talking about various signs, and we see these signs repeated in the book of Revelation. But we've seen in history various things happening, signs in the sky, the sun, the moon, the stars, all of these things involved. And yet for some people, it's just another thing that has happened in the world. Something strange and unexplainable. But the Bible does explain these things. And as I say, we will look at those at a later date. Distress of the nations with perplexity. That word perplexity actually comes from a word that it describes to us that there is no way out. And I certainly think that we live in a world where for a lot of people, there seems to be no way out. There seems to be no hope, and people are living in fear. We go on, the seas and the waves roaring. We know in the Bible that as we look at the term the seas and the waves in prophecy, it's talking about multitudes of people. So when we read this text and we suddenly come to this bit, it almost seems out of place. But when we understand prophecy and we understand what certain elements mean and symbols mean, it's talking about people. He goes on to say that their hearts will be failing them for fear because of the things that are coming on the earth. We see different diseases making a comeback. We see the problems in the banking world, and we'll touch on that later. But we see all of these different things, and it's almost like we're moving through a book, and we're moving from one chapter to the next. And every time we move into the next chapter, the world is in turmoil. People, as I said, are losing hope. They don't know where to turn to for the answers. Governments try their hardest and don't seem to be able to provide a solution to the problems that we have in the world. Question 6. What are the signs that will be seen in the financial or economic world? We're going to look at the book of James now, and chapter 5 and verse 1 to 8. And it says, "Come now, you rich, weep and howl for your miseries that are coming upon you. Your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver are corroded, and their corrosion will be a witness against you and will eat your flesh like fire. You have heaped up treasure in the last days. Indeed, the wages of the laborers who mowed your fields, which you kept back by fraud, cry out, and the cries of the reapers have reached the ears of the Lord of the Sabbath. You have lived on the earth in pleasure and luxury. You have fattened your hearts as in the day of slaughter. You have condemned, you have murdered the just. He does not resist you. Therefore, be patient, brethren, until the coming of the Lord. See how the farmer waits for the precious fruit of the earth, waiting patiently for it until it receives the early and latter rain. You also be patient. Establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand." What are the signs that will be seen in the financial world just before Christ's coming? Verses 1 to 3 tell us that rich men have heaped up treasure in the last days. Do we really see that? Yes, we do. It seems that no matter how much money and wealth and property people have, they cannot get enough of it. And yet they continue to produce and produce and produce and earn and earn and earn and store up that wealth. Verse 4 talks about the hire of the laborers and the money, the wages that they've kept back by fraud, and the fact that that cries out to the Lord. We live in a world now where it's so difficult to be able to save anything. We look back at our parents and our grandparents, and they certainly had a lot less, and yet they were able to save more. But we live in a world that is really designed in a way that you cannot save. And when we think about the financial world and we think about the digital currency that is coming in the very, very near future, that will make it impossible for you to save. You know, people, especially the younger generation now, have been brought up on mobile phones and all of the gadgets that we have. And once you're connected into that system, everything is digital. You know, for us who are slightly older, we've experienced both worlds, if you like. We've been able to use the cash that we were earning. We've been able to save cash at times when we've needed to. And that cash, we could put it in a jar at home. We could keep it there and save it until the end of the year, and then realize we've got a few £100 saved, and that is a bonus for us at the end of the year. But the time is coming where every single penny that we earn or that we have will be digital. You will not be able to just keep a little bit of cash at home for a rainy day. The governments of the world will know exactly what you've got, exactly what you've earned, and where it's come from and where it's gone. We will be living in a financial prison because money just simply will not exist. But verse 8 says, these things show that the coming of the Lord is at hand. Everything that is going on in the world at the moment is designed in such a way that our freedoms are being taken away from us. We are getting near the end of time. We're getting to the point of time where you will not be able to buy and sell without somebody knowing what you are doing, what transactions you are making. And we'll look at this at another time more in depth. But certainly Jesus spoke about the end of the world, and the disciples continued that message. And here in James, we see an overview of what is going to be happening in the financial and economic world. We're in for a terrible time. This will be portrayed as something good. But once we have accepted it, we will see that there are very few benefits to it and a lot of restrictions that come with it. So believe me when I tell you that the end is coming, and it's coming in so many different forms that all of those things will come upon us in such rapid succession that we won't even know where to turn. We're going to finish now the first half of this study here. Time running out. It really is running out. I hope you come back and join us for the second half. And I hope that this study will prompt you to study for yourself further. See you next time.